Hey, everybody say jam-packed. We don't want to live a life that is jam-packed, but how many of you would kind of admit or confess that, man, my life is a little jam-packed? Do we have, all right, good. We have a few honest people. The rest of you, we're going to lay hands on you after church, and this is an American problem. This is something that we get caught up in so easily, and the goal of this series and what we're talking about for the next few weeks is finding out what matters most and making room for it, so that we don't go and major or have success in the things that don't really matter. And so we're pulling back and we're kind of unpeeling the onion of the things that we get caught up in that, that begin to take away from what matters most. And last week we started this series and we looked at some scripture that shows us how we can have a jam-packed life. And then beyond that, we begin to see what happens as consequences and the drawbacks of it and what happens in our life if we're not careful and we're not on target and on point. And so today, what I want to do is take us to another place to where we identify these areas that should matter most. And then now, what do we do to make sure that I say they matter most and it actually looks like it does? That I say these things matter most and they're really a priority and you can see it because I'm living it out and you're seeing it happen and I get to experience the blessing that God gives when I'm honoring Him with my life. And so today, I'm going to start this message called Under God. Everyone say, Under God. And we're going to look at some vital things in our life that we need to set up straight so we can be healthy. My goal for you is that I want you to be healthy. I want you to have a healthy life. I want you to feel good about your life. I want you to have a quality life. But only you can change your life. Not your neighbor, not your mom, your dad, your son or your daughter or coworker. Nobody can. But I'm hoping that you would make some changes, some alterations in your life so that you can have a life that you enjoy. There's a saying that goes like this: people don't change until they hurt so bad that they have to. That I get to a place where I can't do this anymore. I want more, and this isn't good enough. Now, as a pastor, I'm really into marketing, and that's part of just being a pastor is being able to cast vision, being able to help people know where we're going. Here's the mission. Here's the vision. Here's how we're going to, influence people and get them looking in the same direction. And so with that, a lot of times in the business world, you'll be able to see that and pick up on it, and I'll pick up on these things. And one of them is from the store that we go to quite a bit, and I love what they say because it's like, that's what I want. And how many of you go to Walgreens very much? No, okay. So a few of you. One thing about Walgreens, if you ever notice it, is that Walgreens is always on a corner. They always take a spot on a corner. And so their slogan that they have is just related to that. And I love what it says because it just brings it all together of what maybe quality life can look like. And it says this. Are you ready for it? It says this: Walgreens, at the corner of healthy and happy. At the corner, it is cute, right? It's just lovely. Anyway, but at the corner of healthy and happy. I want a life down the road, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, that I can look back and say, I lived a healthy and happy life. In my relationships, in business, in interactions and hobbies and different things. I lived a healthy life, and I'm happy with the results and where I've been. And I want every one of us here to live in that same spot, that quality life that we desire. But here's what happens when we live a jam-packed life, is we get unhealthy. We get unhealthy spiritually. We get unhealthy relationally. We get unhealthy physically. We can get unhealthy financially. And all these things get out of whack because we're jam-packed and we got a lot of stuff we're doing and a lot of stuff we're responsible for. And we have no room to really look at what matters most and what can I do to make sure I highlight that and I live on that and I'm healthy and I'm happy. Now, I've got something that may be foreign to some of you who are younger that I want to show you, and it's binder paper, okay? It's this isn't really used much anymore because we have, documents and such. But on a binder piece of paper, back in the day, we used to have to write essays on binder paper, okay? And so the thing with writing essays on binder paper, it was very strict on how you were to write your essay. You had to stay within the margins. And these margins were here for a specific reason. And the reason is this, is that margins are to help us understand where the beginning and the end of the text is. So we create this margin all the way around and we leave it there so it's very clear. So we can understand it. And even at times our teachers or instructors would say, I want you to double space it too. So to make sure that it was clear and we could see exactly what was being said, the right punctuation, etc. But you know, so many times, some of you have written letters to where it was so jam-packed that your sentences were run-on sentences. They went to the end of the page. They went so far to the end of the page, you started writing up the page. You know what I'm talking about? Or over words, and you've got all of these things going on. And the thing is with that is, it's all scattered, and it can become a mess. And it's hard to identify words. It's hard to figure out where things begin and where things should end. And if we're not careful in our life that we have margin, is that our lives can look like that. I got a lot of stuff, but I don't know where this begins or should begin and where it ends. And I got some things that they're domineering over other things, and I'm trying to get everything done, but I've just got this, and I have no margin. And I want to help you, and I want to be in the same place to where I have margin in my life, to where I feel healthy, and I don't feel like my life is just a rat race, and it's a big pile of stuff and things that I do. And whenever you write an essay, you always have the first draft, which is the rough draft. We have that, we put it together, it's a bunch of ideas, it's kind of messy, but then we end up with our final draft, and that's what we turn in. And my question for you today is, in your life, is what do you want your final draft to be? What do you want your final draft to be? That you would say, these are going to be the things that matter most, and it's going to be very clear and defined in my life, so that I'm not getting success against the wrong things, but I'm having success in the things that matter so much more. And the things that matter to me and my relationship with God and who I am as a person. And I want you to be happy, and I want you to be healthy. And so what happens is, a lot of times, is we have this rough draft that things kind of get weird and crazy. And the reason is because we have got this addiction to this certain word. As a matter of fact, I think we're bound by this certain word. And the word is yes. Everyone say yes. We're good at that because we take on more stuff when we say sure, yes. This is a good opportunity. Yes. Well, Mom and Dad, I want to go here every day of the week. Da, 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 da. Yes. And then we just constantly say yes. Here's the thing, we don't want to disappoint people, so someone asks us something, say, well, I had to say yes. And our life is full with a bunch of yeses. And that's where we end up getting jam-packed, because we haven't learned how to set boundaries and say, no, this is yes and this is okay, but this is where it gets weird and messed up. Now, here's the number one competitor, I believe, for having a jam-packed life, and this is where it gets the competition, the tension happens, and this is what competes with what matters most. What competes with what matters most are things that matter. Because see, we know the things that don't matter, that's easy to cut out. But there are a lot of things in our life that do matter, that are good, that should be done, that need to happen. But if we're not careful in identifying and knowing what they are, we can end up pushing what matters most aside for things that just matter. And so it's important for us to identify it, so we can say, I know what matters most, and I'm going to live that way because I don't want to live a jam-packed life. There's this picture here, and I think it kind of explains what our lives can look like when it's jam-packed. And it's on the screen here. Boom. And this is what a jam-packed life can look like. Believe it or not, there is a truck under that stuff. And if you look at this picture, there are, I don't even know what this stuff is. There's like stacks of lawn chairs on there. There are clothes, bags of whatever. There's bikes hanging off the side. and they're trying to get somewhere. You know they're not moving very fast because you can barely see the truck in the wheels. And then it's like, hey, we got all this stuff. We're going this direction. You need a ride? Sure, get on top. We got room there. Yes, yes. Right, and our life gets jam-packed because we're saying yes. And the thing is we don't get real far. We have a lot of stuff. We're not getting to where we want to be. But man, when we make some space for what matters most, we know we're getting to our destination. We know we have the right things that we're shooting for, and we're taking the right things along in our journey of life. And we need to know what those things are. And we need to understand what margin has to do with it. And so if we're going to live a life under God, a life that really matters to us and it matters to God, there's something that we need to do. And this is in your notes today, and I hope you follow along so you can see some life change. But this is in your notes so important, that we need to make room for what matters most and then add a little extra to it. Make room for what matters most and then add a little extra to it. What can happen is that we have things that matter most in our life, but we're quick to really cut off, oh, I know this thing's in here because I gotta. Are you with me? Or are you following me? And I know it's important. I got to make sure I do this, and then I got to go over here and do this. Or I can cut back a little bit here. At least I've done something and I've taken care of this. Does matter most, but it gets crowded out by other stuff that just matters. And we have to be able to identify that, or we're going to live a jam-packed life. Now, what happens is if we have a jam-packed life and we're filled up with stuff, this paper can get all crinkled up. It can get messed up, and because we're jam-packed and we've written over it several times, we've erased and we've replaced words, and it becomes jam-packed, and it ends up with not very much, not really productive. We look at our lives and it's not as happy and healthy as we desired it to be. Another thing I believe is that this ends up not being a life that honors God, because God's given us a life to be stewards with. That we are the stewards of our life. That we are the stewards with the purpose and the plans and the future that God has given us. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, and I'm pretty sure for you, because you're here in church today, is that you just want God, you want to honor God with your life. You want God to bless your life. You don't want to live a life that's like this, and then, man, it was so jam-packed, full of stuff. But what is it? The stuff that really matters. And today I just want you to take some notes, because we're going to journey through this, and I'm hoping that I can get you to a place to where you're able to identify some things and detect some things that you say, look, this has got to change a little bit. Because a life that honors God is a life God honors. A life that honors God is a life that God honors. That in everything, now I'm not forcing you to do the Christian stuff or the God thing. If this is foreign to you, I do believe you'll see some things in here that are healthy and just seem healthy and happy. But man, for those of us who are Christians, our lives, it's important for us to be devoted to living happy and healthy in God's eyes and honor Him. Because here's what happens if we don't have this desire to honor God with our life. It competes with the plans and the purposes that God has for us. And then we're spinning our wheels, we're running into walls, and God, why don't you? And He's like, well, why don't you? Right? Why don't you quit tripping and try to honor what I've set in place so I can bless you and you can see my full plan come to fruition. And so our goal needs to be to honor God. Like the scripture in 1 Corinthians, it says it really clear. It says, whatever you may do, do all. Everyone say all. Do all for the honor and glory of God. Whatever you may do in your life, make sure that it honors God. And it's happy and it's healthy as far as the rhythm of life and how you're honoring Him and how it looks to Him. And that you would be doing the right things. You'd be majoring on God's majors, not on your majors. Because it's easy for us to get caught up in this scripture and maybe have our own version that we've written. And it would be, whatever you may do, do all for the honor and glory of yourself. Man, just do it. Because we live in a culture that says if it feels good, do it. Man, you liked it. Don't let anybody rain on your parade. go after it. And so we're all about, I mean, it's hard to say this, we're all about honoring ourselves. Oh, you're just hating on me. Haters are my motivators. And you got all this stuff you say, right? And you're trying to sound all cool and like, man, how can you? And you want to pursue things. And what happens is, though, is we're so caught up in honoring ourselves and our desires that we end up jam-packed. And we haven't made room, enough room, for the things that matter most. Now, there was this guy named Joshua in the book of Joshua, that he was now the leader of this nation. And he comes to a place that he comes before the people and he draws a line. And he says, he's basically saying this, look, some things need to change around here in our lives and how we're living for God and how we're in the directions we're going. Because they began to live according to the ways of the world and the cultures around them. These pagan things that weren't of God and what God wanted for them. And they started living in this direction. And Joshua came and he just basically drew a line in the sand to say, you're going to have to pick which one you're going to have. You're going to have to figure out which kind of life and direction you want to go. But you can't do both. And we can't do both. Either we're going to live jam-packed or we're going to live peaceful and we're going to live in a way that, man, I enjoy the quality of my life. But this is exactly here what Joshua says to the people when he gets them all together. He says, if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, he says, hey, look, if you desire all the other stuff, hey, I'm just putting it out there, Israel. You love doing that stuff. And it's undesirable for you to do God, to serve God. He says, then choose for yourselves this day whom you're going to serve. Because you can't go the same direction. You have to pick one or the other. And he says, but as for me and my household, we are going to serve the Lord. We are going to make sure that we have a house under God, a life that is under God. A life that is living for Him, a life that is blessed by Him, a life that honors God, and it's a life that He honors. And we're going to make sure we have boundaries and we have margin in our lives, that we're not adding things in and we have a big old ball of stuff and it feels like we don't have a life that we want. Now, here's where margin comes into play. And sometimes, it's easy, to identify areas that we see in our lives, but I'm going to tell you, for some, I'm just going to step on toes a little bit, and just because I love you, I just want us to grow, is that some of us, we work so much overtime. I got to work. They got overtime. I'm taking it. You say, why are you taking it? Because you don't have boundaries, right? You don't have this margin in your life, and work's overloading. Why don't you make some margin in your life so you don't have to do that? So you don't understand. I got bills to pay. Why? Because you didn't have margin? And then, we get caught up with other things that we're doing. I'm running a rat race and I'm shopping, and so I don't have time for my family because I didn't create margin to say this is when that stops and this is when this begins. Or I don't go on vacation very much because I got my agenda. I've got projects that are happening, and we haven't put margin in projects so we can spend time on vacations and take that time off that we need. And so if we're going to live a life that honors God, then we have got to make margin and know where our life begins and where it should end in certain areas, especially for the things that matter most. You got to add a little bit of extra to it all the time. And so I'm going to look at the different types of rooms that we have in our houses, or some houses have, where we're going to make a decision that we're going to live a life that's under God. That from here on out, I want to be happy and healthy in God's eyes and in my eyes and in those that are around us. And it's important to us. And so there's about 7 rooms that I want to look at in our homes. The first one is the front room. Everyone say front room. The front room is the very first room you walk into. And when you come in, you've noticed this before, you've walked into someone's home and you notice a smell. Right? Doesn't every house have a smell? You know what I'm saying? You walk in and you go into the house and you're like, I want you to know you have a smell. You have a smell. Some might call it a stench, but you have a smell. All right? And all of us have a smell, and it permeates throughout the house. And the thing is, we don't always know about it, but this is what's important. Our homes, if we're going to honor God, if you're here and you're a Christian, I say, I'm honoring God with my life. Our homes should be filled with the aroma of Christ. That Christ is center. He is in the front room. He is front and center of all we do. The rooms that are in the house, they don't dictate him. He comes in and he permeates throughout the home. That I don't have this kind of balance that the world says. The world would say this. And outside of God's culture would say this. That you got to have this part of your life, this part of your life. Got to have the job life, got to have the God life, got to have the recreation life. And you got to have all these compartments in all these parts. But God isn't a part. He is the part. He is Lord over all of it. If I'm giving him a life that honors him, then I'm saying, I want you to bleed into every part of my life, every relationship, every responsibility, every decision I make, any opportunity that I take. God, I want you to be honored in it. And if I should say yes, I want God to be number one. So, the language we have to have in our homes, this isn't because I'm a pastor. It's simply, we go to church on Sunday. We spend time together, reading the Bible. We try to make sure that I'm growing in God, and we make these decisions for ourselves. You have to make those decisions. Do I want to grow? Do I want to know God more? Am I ready to step out and build some relationships in the church so I'm not just doing this thing on my own? This is going to be, I want God to be over everything. I want to have a life that's under God, and I want you to get this because the world talks about balance, but equality does not mean quality. We want to make God equal with everything. He is not to be equal. He is to be Lord of all in every area of my life. And if I'm going to serve him, I got to choose today which way I'm going to go. These things can't be equal with God. I want quality. He's number one. Are you feeling me this morning? So we go from the front room and it permeates on through. We got the smell. And then it carries us. I'm kind of skipping back to the master bedroom. Going on to the master bedroom here. Now check this out. In the master bedroom, this is where the intimacy takes place. This is where the intimacy takes place. You know what I'm saying? Okay, anyway. But there's intimacy that's there in the relationship of a husband and wife and as mom and dad that has to be nurtured. That has to be cared for on all different levels. And we need to make sure we continue to care for that. Now, I want to say this may step on some toes a little bit, but I got to say it, is that if you're not married, and you want to honor God with your life, you're not allowed to go into the master bedroom. Okay. But you're not allowed to. If you're not married, you don't get to have a sex life. Because that's something that's done within the boundaries of marriage. This is where we have intimacy. You can have that, and it's not about like, well, we're kind of married before God. No, get married legally and obey the laws of the land. So when I go and I'm in a holy place in the master bedroom and we have good, holy intimacy with each other. And it's got to be nurtured through where we have dates. And we're together and we have time and one-on-one. It's not with like other people coming along with us. No, I want to still 20 years from now, I want to be able to laugh with my wife. We got to be able to take trips and have getaways. Some of you may say, man, they go out of town a lot. Yeah, we need to go out of town a lot because I want to be with her away from everything else. You need that for us as pastors, that we would be healthy and we would be happy in our marriage and in our lives. And the master bedroom is huge because it can dictate the rest. Because if we're roommates, everyone else is a roommate and running in their own place and in their own direction. So the master bedroom has to be in order. The next one is, you guys follow me? All of a sudden it got quiet. The next one is kitchen. Everybody say kitchen. I said kitchen, okay? But we go into the kitchen, and this is where more community in our home takes place and the relationships part. And we build that within our families. Because we can live a life that's so fast-paced that we miss each other. And so we have to come in, and it's important for us that we have dinner together as a family. It's easy to get caught up in eat and run. Here it is, just take off and go, and we do that. No, we need to be able to take time and sit down, put away the cell phones, like have surgery and put away the cell phones, right? And put those away so that we can talk and make time for that. And to be able to talk about life and calling and purpose and everything else with our kids. And sometimes there's, after we're done eating, we're still sitting there talking, this talk about sex comes up. And yeah. And we're talking about sex stuff to try to learn and be healthy, and how does that happen? And so there's some powerful stuff that comes up to the surface, and there's only one person that's uncomfortable. Lori. Lori's like, oh my gosh. She's freaking out. But these kind of things wouldn't happen. We'll talk about it if we're not at the kitchen. We're not together building the community within our homes. The next one it's real important, is the bedrooms. The bedrooms where individuals live, where my kids live, and going and spending time with them individually, and trying to make sure I get out of my own schedule and my own rhythm and everything else, that I go and I make sure that my kids understand you matter way more than anything else. You are one of the things that matter most. And I want to spend time with you because I want you to know not only do I love you, but I like you. And I'm interested in you. And I have to make that time. We have to. That's what matters most. And another thing is, then we go to the living room. Everyone say living room. Now, living room is different because this is where I'm focusing on me. I'm focusing on you with nobody else around, no other obligations. That you would say, look, I want a life that feels good, feels great, it's quality, I enjoy myself. That we are able to relax and rest. Check this out. That days off are days off. That, you know what, there's that day, some of us could use like a pajama day. All right, you've been going and going and going, and you got stuff like where you turn off, get rid of the laptop and the emails and the texting and all these other obligations that come in. You're like, I am not taking a shower today. I'm just watching Netflix. I do not care. Bird Box, here it is. I've been hearing about, and you want to, it's like to a place where I got to cut everything out, and man, I can enjoy me. And I don't have to feel guilty like I should be doing more. If I want to exercise and I want to have a project, I need to make sure I have time in the living room for me. Some of us just need to get freed up to be able to do that. And then the next one is the office. And the office is a necessary place. It's a place of work that we have to work. We have to make sure that we provide, and it's very important. Here's the important thing, though, is that we have to keep the work in the office. And whatever academics or things that you're doing, keep the work in the office. Put boundaries on it. Do not let the beast out. Because work is a beast, and it can jump out, and it can go through the house, and all the relationships and all the agendas and everything else that matter most, they're just getting knocked around, and everything is adjusting to work, and work has overtaken everything because we're passionate about it, or we like it, or we get more from it, or ours. And some of us think that we're working a job when really the job may be working you. Let's not get worked. Let's make sure we're healthy in having those boundaries. Then the last one we come to is the garage. And we come to the garage, what we're talking about, all the other things in this world outside of our home, outside of our life, this under God house. That my extended family, that friends, hobbies, what the culture says it should be happening, that doesn't define this. This defines that. Because we can be pulled around by so many different things and feel like I should be living this way, so we adjust this. Or so-and-so said I need to be doing this, so we do this. Or everybody else is doing this, I guess I got to do this. And that's how we live. And so we're jam-packed, we're saying yes to everything. And what matters is competing for what matters most. And that's going to happen for the rest of your life. It's going to happen for the rest of my life. But nobody here wants to live a jam-packed life at all. Now, in 2002, I had been in ministry, full-time ministry for 2 or 3 years. And something happened to me that was really terrible. I was driving, I was working hard, man. I love working hard and working for the Lord and serving and doing everything I can, pouring my heart and soul out. And when I was young, I was very zealous. And I remember that I had all these different things I was doing and going on. And I remember I was pulling up to a light and in my car, and I was driving, and the light turned green, and that's the last thing I remembered. And the reason is at some point when I turned whatever it was, I had a grand mal seizure. And I'm driving down the street, and I guess, if you don't know what a grand mal seizure is, it's like where your body's totally out of control, and it's just like spazzing out. Well, one of the things I was doing was I had my foot totally on the gas, and I was flying down the street. I went through an intersection. I hit a car, bounced off of that, and I'm headed for a store, and there's a light post in front of it, and I wrap my car around it. And all of a sudden, I don't know, they told me I was swinging my arms. They literally had to tape my hands together, and they had to help me through that time. I woke up in the ambulance, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'm freaking out, and I walk away from that just with a little scratch. But over the next few months, they took my license away. I couldn't drive. I had the lapse of consciousness. And they did a lot of testing on me and testing my brain out, see if anything was wrong. Lori's sure there's something wrong in some area, but they were doing all these tests and things, trying to find what kind of tripped it, set it off, and they came to the conclusion of this. They said, Dave, what we think it is that because of how hard you work, in your work schedule, and how hard you push yourself, and then an unhealthy diet, you don't eat the way you should, and then the lack of sleep because you're going, that's what caused you to have a seizure. That's what caused things to get out of control. Because you're doing stuff. Dave, you got to change your pattern of life. And so I didn't have a license for 6 months, and that was because I was living jam-packed. I want you to know this. God loves you. He loves your passion. He loves the efforts that you put in. He loves the plan. He loves your kids. He loves your family. He loves your spouse. He loves your future. And He wants you to live a life that He has given that would honor Him. And He's going to honor it. And you're going to see the fruit of living for Him in the way you want and living healthy and happy under God. You're going to see His blessing on your life. You don't have to worry about getting out of control. You don't have to worry about being jam-packed. You are free because you're living in the way that He wants. So here's Joshua. He comes to the whole nation, and he stands before him, and he says 3 words in the midst of the whole thing. Choose for yourselves. Here's the truth. Nobody can choose for you if you are or you aren't going to have a jam-packed life. As a matter of fact, a jam-packed life isn't going to just leave. A jam-packed life isn't going to slow down. A jam-packed life is going to say, hey, here's some boundaries that you should have now. A jam-packed life is going to be changed because you have chosen to put boundaries in and say, I'm going to create margin for what matters most. I'm even going to add a little extra to it. And this matters, but this has got to stay in the cage. So for you today, you've been saying yes a lot. But there's this word that we learned at a very young age. And we became specialists with this word. We were maybe 2 years old or so, and we were pretty good at it growing up as we were young. And that word was no. And you were good at it. But somehow, over time and with different things in your life, you've stopped saying no and you just say yes. And if you want to get to a place where you don't have a jam-packed life anymore, no is going to determine what matters most in your life. No. Because I'm going to tell you something. If I say no to what matters, I'm saying yes to what matters most. But if I go and I say yes to things that matter, I'm turning all the things that matter most and I'm saying no. So where is it going to be? What direction? What is it in your life right now? You know, this thing is bleeding into everything. This thing is taken over. I've said yes too long. Something has changed. I need to say no to it. That's going to begin to define what matters most in your life.